As Kotarou and the first stood in the new area, a realization suddenly struck Kotarou. He recognized the place. It was from the time he had been granted a new life by the mysterious figure. The memory hit him hard. But before he could dwell on it, the first launched a sudden attack. Kotarou managed to deflect it, prompting the first to acknowledge the good block and comment that perhaps he was showing too much killing intent. Kotarou questioned whether the first truly planned to fight in such a strange place. The first, undeterred, chuckled and replied that the location didn't matter. He was only interested in fighting strong opponents. That was simply his nature, after all. He was the first Fuuma Kotarou. The words stirred something in Kotarou. He realized it then. The man before him was the original, the real Fuuma Kotarou. As Kotarou stood before him, memories from his past surged forth. In the flashback, Kotarou found himself once again before Elder Jinan. The elder looked at him and declared that, from that day forward, he would be called Fuuma Kotarou. The words echoed in Kotarou's mind as he repeated them in disbelief. Born from a mountain of corpses, since the earliest days of his life, the battlefield had been his only playground. He had grown up amidst the screams of war, using bizarre techniques, smiling even as he spilled oceans of blood. A monster shaped by violence and survival. That was the legacy he had inherited. Elder Jinan's words echoed in his memory, words once spoken with solemn authority. The name he was given belonged to such a being, a strong immortal. It was a name meant to be carved into legend, a name that would command fear across generations. And through him, the Hojo clan that wielded such warriors would inspire terror throughout the world. But beneath that title, Kotarou had always seen the truth. No matter how glorious the name, ninjas were disposable pawns. Freedom, and even a name, were illusions forever out of reach so long as he remained bound to the identity of a ninja. Back in the present, Kotarou stepped toward the first. He acknowledged the title spoken so often, the strongest ninja. And if Fuuma Kotarou was meant to be the strongest, then the one who emerged victorious here would be the real bearer of that name. Without hesitation, he activated his technique, ninjutsu, Phantom Flame. Flames erupted from his body, wild and untamed. The first immediately responded with his own ninjutsu, Flame Master. Fire engulfed him just as fiercely. Surrounded by blazing fury, the two dashed forward. When they collided, the force of their clash triggered an enormous explosion of fire. Then, just as quickly, they vanished into the sky, reappearing midair where they continued exchanging devastating blows. The first cried out with overwhelming excitement, praising Kotarou, calling him the fifth with admiration. He could see it clearly now. The immense training, the endless suffering Kotarou had endured to reach this point. Such a realm, so distant from the grasp of ordinary people, could only be achieved through a conviction of exceptional strength. He had waited a long time for an opponent like this, someone strong enough, worthy enough to stand before him as an equal. Now, at last, they could fight to their heart's content as true rivals. A strange feeling welled up within Kotarou as the battle raged on. Amid the whirlwind of flames and strikes, a thought surfaced, clear and undeniable. He wanted to test himself, truly test himself. Could he defeat the real Fuuma Kotarou? As the two clashed with intense ferocity, the first reveled in the thrill of battle. Within his mind, he demanded the fifth Fuuma Kotarou to meet him with full strength, to ignite his soul, make his blood boil, and set his flesh into motion. A memory from long ago suddenly surfaced, a flashback of his first life. He remembered the curse that began from the moment he was born. Crawling out from beneath heaps of corpses, he survived by consuming the dead. The scene shifted to a battlefield, where chaos reigned and warriors screamed in agony as flames devoured them. One soldier, writhing in pain, questioned the nature of the child before him, and another, trembling, identified him for what he was, a monster. Amidst the blaze, the first walked through the burning wreckage, his mind turning to the power within him, wondering if it too was a curse. From the shadows, a ninja emerged and questioned him, asking what kind of rappa he was. The first paused at the unfamiliar term, but the ninja explained that names differed: Rappa, Kamari, Kusa, but the essence was the same. They were all ninja, killing machines, creatures bred only to kill. This idea stirred something deep within him. If their lives were only about killing, he wondered aloud if that meant they were strong. A wild grin spread across his face as the thought took root. He admitted that the only time he had ever felt truly alive was when he stood on the brink of death, when he was locked in deadly combat with worthy foes. It was in those blood-soaked moments that he found purpose, found joy in the fact that he had even been born. Even before his training as a ninja, killing had been all he ever knew. Back in the present, the clash between the First and Kotarou raged on. Kotarou managed to shatter the armor protecting the First, and for a moment, the two stared one another down. The First, amused and impressed, smiled. Then he acknowledged Kotarou's formidable firepower and readied another technique, challenging him once more. Both prepared to unleash ninjutsu at the same time, until a sudden light appeared between them. The radiance pulsed, then began to fade, slowly revealing a silhouette. Kotarou's expression shifted as he recognized who it was. Emerging from the light were the creature and Meili. The creature looked around in confusion, wondering aloud where they had ended up and what was going on. Meili silenced him with an irritated shush. Suddenly, 3 more lights appeared high above and then shot down toward the battlefield, landing with impact. The First turned to look behind him and saw one of the new arrivals. It was another reincarnator, Jeanne d'Arc, who stepped forward with resolve, saying that she was guided once more by divine power. As the next light faded, another figure became visible, another reincarnator named Leif. Following that, a bold voice rang out with disdain. Another reincarnator, Ragnar Lodbrok, scoffed at the group, questioning their strength. Kotarou looked around, taking in the presence of these new arrivals. A realization sank in: each and every one of them was a reincarnator. Then, above them all, even more lights began to appear in the sky, each one descending rapidly toward the battlefield below. As the projectiles rained down and the chaos subsided, the lights gradually dimmed, unveiling a new group of figures standing in the shadows. Kotarou immediately sensed it, an overwhelming pressure unlike anything he had ever felt before. Each presence radiated power, none of them ordinary. Ragnar observed the arrivals with a mocking tone, amused by what seemed to be an unexpected gathering. Jeanne, oozing disdain, questioned the god's intention in bringing in so many of what she referred to as nasty newbies, insisting that one apostle such as herself should have been enough. Leif remained motionless, his silence unnerving amidst the tension. Meanwhile, a grotesque voice from the monster latched onto Meili's body growled in excitement, calling out to her as her stomach growled hungrily at the sight of fresh opponents. The First grew irritated, his anger boiling over as he shouted at the intruders, furious that his perfect death match had been disrupted. He glared at the gathering as the ground trembled beneath them, a deep rumble shaking the area. Kotarou's attention was drawn downward as something began to stir beneath the water. Without warning, tendrils burst forth, their grotesque surfaces adorned with contorted, leering faces. Kotarou reacted instinctively, leaping into the air to evade them, startled by their sudden appearance. The other reincarnators, undisturbed, stood atop the tendrils as they rose around them, silently watching. One massive tendril stretched far above the others, spiraling upward into the sky toward a swirling black portal. From within, the same flame Kotarou had seen when he was first granted a new life, a voice emerged. It addressed the reincarnators, calling them the heroes who had slaughtered the demon kin and commending the battle as wonderful. However, the voice made it clear that it had fully expected these cruel and tyrannical beings to kill the demon lord, and now, with that expectation fulfilled, it proposed something even more twisted. More blood was needed, not just for amusement, but for the gods themselves and for the great god tree. This place, the voice explained, was the very root of the world. The branches of the tree pierced through all realms, and its massive trunk bound the structure of existence together. The tree was Yggdrasil, and the blood spilled throughout all the worlds flowed down to this very base. It was this flow of blood that sustained the multiverse. Although the reincarnators had already shed much blood, it still wasn't enough. The voice expressed its hunger for more, but said that simple violence no longer sufficed. Just letting them rampage wasn't interesting anymore. There was a new rule now. Even beings as cruel as these had surely developed attachments since their rebirths. People they cared about, places they considered home. So, a new condition was imposed. If any of them were to die, the world they had reincarnated into would collapse with them. The only way to preserve what they loved was to kill and survive. A reward was offered. To the one who spilled the most blood, any wish would be granted. One of the reincarnators responded with contempt, questioning the being's divinity and labeling it a deranged, evil god. Another reincarnator reflected aloud on the terrifying implication that a wish granted through the verbal reality skill was indeed possible. Suddenly, a brilliant light engulfed each of them. Without warning, their bodies were lifted and shot off into the sky like beams of energy. As Kotarou soared through the air, a heavy thought settled in his chest. If he were to die, then Hyri, Miria, BB-28, even Servain, and all the people he had met since his reincarnation would vanish with him. Their worlds, their lives, everything would end. As they flew through the air, another reincarnator let out a laugh, mocking the gods as a joke no matter where they came from. Still, they admitted that this current lineup looked like it could be fun. One of the descending lights shot toward a massive vine. As the glow faded, Jeanne appeared from within it. Her expression shifted. She recognized the place. It was the 16th layer world, Grisfire, a realm blanketed by infinitely expanding forests. Suddenly, 3 more lights shot down and struck the ground before her. As the light faded, 3 other reincarnators emerged. Jeanne stared at them, her gaze unwavering. She declared that the gods didn't need another apostle, just her. Elsewhere, another light hurtled downward and faded to reveal the first Fuuma Kotarou. He glanced around, realizing that he had arrived in a layer world he had never been to before. This was the 32nd layer world, Batrorth, a place where a vast, empty land stretched out endlessly. Seeing the barren expanse, Kotarou figured it was a perfect location for a fight. As he looked behind him, another light descended and touched down. A figure stepped out and addressed him casually, asking if he was a ninja, remarking that he could sense it from the vibe he gave off. This newcomer was a reincarnator as well, Ishikawa Gomen. Gomen proposed a ninja battle. The first looked at him with a flicker of curiosity, uncertain at first about the mention of ninjas. Gomen grinned proudly, boasting about his past as a rogue ninja from Higa and calling himself everyone's favorite master thief, the great Ishikawa Gomen. Without any more words, the two launched into combat, exchanging quick, precise blows. After the brief clash, Gomen exclaimed with excitement, impressed by the movements that confirmed his suspicion. His opponent was definitely a ninja. The first responded with a gleam of interest, realizing that this might actually be fun. Gomen suddenly struck the ground with his fist, sending deep cracks splitting across the terrain. The cracks raced across the earth, reaching toward the first, who silently braced himself. Without delay, Gomen activated his ninjutsu Hibari Fire Needle. Fire erupted from multiple holes torn into the ground, sharp and violent. The first soared into the air, noting with curiosity how Gomen had managed to draw magma from beneath the surface. But as he scanned the scorched ground below, he quickly noticed Gomen had vanished. In a flash, the master thief appeared behind him, throwing a punch. The first dodged swiftly, distancing himself once more. Gomen commended his reflexes, admitting that his unique skill, expression mind reading, had failed to keep up. It was a skill that allowed him to read others' thoughts through their expressions, but his opponent was simply too fast. He proposed something thrilling, to reveal each other's unique skills and clash in a true deathmatch, the way only true battle maniacs could. As the first soared through the air, a grin stretched across his face. He revealed his unique skill, Death Sight. With eyes that could perceive the exact moment any living being would die, he informed Gomen that his death would occur in 10 seconds. Gomen froze momentarily, absorbing the chilling prediction. Then, defiant and exhilarated, he surged forward, determined to defy fate. The two collided mid-air, exchanging blow after blow in a relentless storm of strikes. Their battle carved trails through the sky, neither yielding an inch. Eventually, Gomen descended to the ground, chest heaving. The first followed, landing nearby. Laughter burst from Gomen's lips. He had survived. He shouted his triumph, celebrating the fact that he was still alive. But the celebration was short-lived. Without warning, Gomen's body split apart, the wounds from their battle catching up all at once. As his body collapsed, the first looked on with a maniacal grin, finally speaking his name. He was the first Fuuma Kotarou. Gomen, stunned in his final moments, recognized the name. The creator of all ninjutsu, there was no way he could have stood a chance against someone of that caliber. As life faded from him, he chuckled at the irony, admitting his own defeat. The first, watching the scene with cold amusement, acknowledged Gomen's bravado as somewhat entertaining. Then, another beam of light fell from the sky. As it faded, it revealed the fifth Fuuma Kotarou. Slowly, he turned to face the first. The first met his gaze and remarked on the unexpected reunion, noting that he hadn't anticipated seeing him again so soon. As Kotarou prepared to face the first, his thoughts churned. The difference in power between them was almost negligible. Yet, he realized that the first wasn't fighting seriously, he was enjoying himself. That realization struck deep. Engulfing his entire body in flames with his ninjutsu, Kotarou acknowledged the truth. The first was the creator of ninjutsu. Everything Kotarou knew was merely an imitation of that original work. He understood he couldn't win as he was now. He had to grow during this battle, had to evolve, because without doing so, victory was impossible. The first stared at him blankly, then his expression shifted. With a burst of enthusiasm, he declared his desire to continue their deathmatch and urged Kotarou to come at him. Kotarou responded by preparing to unleash one of his most powerful techniques. He invoked the Fuuma 12 Forbidden Arts, then activated Shaka, scorching heat in combination with another deadly ninjutsu, Shigurui, Death Frenzy. But before Kotarou's attacks could reach him, the first mirrored the action, activating his own Shigurui, Death Frenzy. The resulting collision exploded with overwhelming force, shaking the battlefield and leaving behind a landscape scarred by flame and destruction. As the smoke and fire cleared, the two resumed their battle, exchanging a flurry of powerful strikes that tore across the field with incredible speed and force. Amid their clash, the first called out to Kotarou, telling him he must already be aware of his own unique skill. He questioned why Kotarou didn't use the Godkin's verbal reality, a power so potent that uttering the word die could end the match instantly. But Kotarou refused. To him, that would be meaningless. Kotarou's thoughts burned with conviction. Freedom, emotions, even a name. He had once been denied all of it. But now everything had changed. He had seized his own freedom and lived like a human. The name Fuuma Kotarou wasn't just a title. It was the name of the strongest ninja. And by killing the first, the original ninja, he could finally become the real thing. He knew he had to surpass the first through ninjutsu. Anything less would render his struggle meaningless. With unwavering resolve, he voiced his intent. The first, thrilled by the fire in Kotarou's spirit, responded with fervor. He called it wonderful, praising the fifth's determination, and vowed to answer that conviction with the full might of his power. In his eyes, he could already see it: Kotarou's death. The first observed Kotarou intently, realizing something profound. He could see it clearly: Kotarou would live for a very long time. With that thought, he activated a ninjutsu called Lightning Fire. At the very same moment, Kotarou mirrored the action, unleashing the same technique. Their attacks collided in a thunderous explosion that rocked the battlefield. Amidst the chaos, Kotarou managed to shatter the first's armor once again, but the first regenerated it almost instantly. As he watched Kotarou, a new realization dawned on him. Kotarou hadn't simply mimicked the ninjutsu. He had instantly copied it and somehow made it even stronger than the original. The battle raged on, the two continuing to clash across the battlefield with devastating force, leaving enormous craters in their wake. Lightning Fire was one of the source ninjutsu techniques, focusing the electrical current flowing through the body into a single point and then unleashing it. Kotarou escalated the battle by unleashing Great Lightning Fire, releasing an overwhelming surge of energy that engulfed the entire area. The first, now fatally wounded, acknowledged what he had seen. Kotarou's death, as he had foreseen, was still far in the future, waiting at the end of countless mastered techniques and endless battles. That truth filled the first with a sense of satisfaction. Even as his life ebbed away, he felt happiness. As only his head remained, he declared it had truly been the ultimate deathmatch, and Kotarou was worthy of the name. A flashback emerged, revealing a time when someone had once asked the first what his name was. He had answered that he had none. Eventually, people began calling him by a name, because despite his small stature, he possessed terrifying speed. They called him a demon as swift as the wind, the strongest ninja. Back in the present, with the last of his strength, the first spoke once more. Kotarou, he said, was the one who truly embodied the name Fuuma Kotarou. The first looked at Kotarou with a fading gaze and, with a sense of peace, expressed his gratitude. Because of Kotarou, he felt as though he had truly come back to life. Kotarou stood before the first, a quiet strength in his gaze. He spoke of what he had gained, things he once believed were forever out of reach. He had been acknowledged by a formidable opponent, had learned many of the source ninjutsu techniques, and vowed to keep growing stronger. But this time, his reason was different. He would grow stronger for the sake of those he had to protect. The first listened, and with a faint, fading smile, he responded. The idea of fighting to protect someone. It was a nice thought. For a ninja like that to exist, it wasn't so bad after all. With that final sentiment, he breathed his last. Far from them, across the vast expanse of the World Tree, one of the many realms anchored to its branches fell into ruin. It crumbled completely. In another realm, fire engulfed the land, turning the sky a blistering red. Among the screams of terrified residents, one figure stood out, a reincarnator, laughing madly amidst the chaos. He took pleasure in the bloodshed and proclaimed that if victory went to the one who spilled the most blood, then he would gladly slaughter the locals of that world to pass the time. High above, a god watched with quiet satisfaction. Blood flowed just as expected of humanity. Their revival, it seemed, was drawing near. Back on the battlefield, Kotarou reflected in silence. Killing had once defined him. It had been everything. He never imagined a day like this would come. A day where that belief felt so distant. Suddenly, a light tore through the sky and shot down before him. As the radiance dimmed, a new reincarnator stood revealed. With a wicked grin, he stepped forward and asked if Kotarou would be his next opponent. Kotarou met the man's gaze with calm indifference. He made it clear he had no interest in him. and for the reincarnator's own good, it would be wise not to show any killing intent. The reincarnator's eyes narrowed with fury. He demanded to know what Kotarou had just said. Kotarou moved in an instant, dashing forward and seizing the reincarnator by the face. With unrelenting force, he slammed the man's head into the ground, the impact cracking the surface beneath them. Without pause, he followed up with a brutal ninjutsu called head firework. This source ninjutsu technique involved violently swinging the head up and down with such force that it compressed the skull, causing the brain to explode from within. The reincarnator's life ended in a flash of devastating finality. As the lifeless body collapsed, Kotarou stood over him and declared his name with cold finality, instructing the corpse to carry it to the grave. He was Fuuma Kotarou,